Commonwealth realms, the world indeed, have all bid a fond farewell to Her Britannic Majesty Elizabeth II, and as her coffin was lowered into the vault, the herald was reading out her style being the most noble, most high, most excellent majesty, and so forth. So the defender of the faith has been called to her reward. And I can say without fear of contradiction that it was the greatest funeral of all time by any metric. They invited 185 heads of state, roughly 100 came, and that would break all records. So there were easily 10 million mourners in person on the day of the funeral in London and lining the processional route to Windsor Castle. That the journey from central London to Windsor Castle could be driven in maybe half an hour, if you're going just under the speed limit, but they took 3 hours. So they deliberately went very slow, and of course, people are throwing coffins at the hearse. So it was broadcast live all around the globe. I wonder how many billions of people tuned in for some portion of it, because it took from about was it 10 in the morning British time to about 5 o'clock in the evening British time, and there'll be this. So it's just finished in St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. That's the church where 4 years ago the ill-starred Prince Harry married the monstrous Me Again Markle. But anyway, that's a subplot I'm not going to go into right now. So it's really is a epoch-making event. An era has ended, and it's only now that I can really digest that. When I saw her coffin on that catafalque, which could be depressed into the vault, disappear from the last time, her crown, her orb, her scepter, all having been removed, ready to be handed on to her firstborn, King Charles III. So the Elizabethan era is at an end. The second Elizabethan era, the Caroline age, has commenced. Perhaps I should say the third Caroline age, inasmuch as the current king is the third to bear that name. So Elizabeth II was easily the most photographed person of all time. She was the monarch of one of a major power, not quite a superpower even at the beginning of her reign in 1952. Obviously, the monarch of dozens of countries, several of which abolished the monarchy during her reign, but still at the time of her death, the monarch of 14 nation states, head of the Commonwealth, and so forth, and was there for 70 years. So someone who in 70 years scarcely ever got it wrong, who was guided by a sense of duty. I don't mean to sanctify her. Maybe she was wicked in her private life. I don't know. And she said she wasn't a terribly warm person. You can't be liked by everyone. She was who she was in terms of her personality traits, but she did her best to not let the side down. Rightly or wrongly, tens of millions of people exalted her, and she didn't want to disappoint them or cause any embarrassment. And I think she was about 99% successful in doing that. And there was this beautiful floral bouquet upon her coffin, poignant notes from her family. It was attended by her 4 children, some of her grandchildren, her great grandchildren, her nephew Viscount Linley, her cousins, and so forth. So it began this morning when the Grenadier Guards, those chaps in their red tunics and their black bearskins hats, bore her coffin out of Westminster Hall, and just what would normally be a 3-minute walk to Westminster Abbey. Obviously, they removed their headdress to do so. You seldom see them without that. 8 guardsmen carrying it, 2 officers supervising them. You can distinguish the officers by the gold braid on their collars and indeed their cuffs. And then it was put on a gun carriage, and the sailors, 142 sailors, drew it through the streets to there. So it was accompanied by others. Obviously, the Royal Company of Archers, that's the Queen's bodyguard in Scotland, they were there, the Yeomen of the Guard, comedy called Beefeaters, the people who are actually tour guides in the Tower of London, and so on. So a few mourners were wearing black head to toe. Some wore black but for a white shirt. There were black armbands on the military uniforms. There've been soldiers with their arms reversed. I can't really show you from this angle, but with the rifle not like here, like that, behind the back. That's not far enough back to demonstrate. So people were wearing black of the thickest crepe in some circumstances. Other people were wearing ordinary clothes. I was much further away with the ordinary mourners. Only VIPs could get within a mile of Westminster Abbey. because it was an extraordinarily challenging security operation. So many heads of state being in the same building at one time had to be swept for bombs, sniffer dogs, everything like that. The security cordon, this ring of steel, partly to keep these heads of state alive, but also crowd control, because the Metropolitan Police, that's the police in London, about 30,000 officers, they can't have them all on duty at any one time. They've got to have some on duty in the middle of the night, some are ill and so forth. They just didn't have the numbers. So police were drafted in from the rest of the realm. The police service in Northern Ireland, Heddlu, as police from Wales. I'm not sure about police from North Britain. I saw police from Merseyside and elsewhere to help deal with the numbers, because London's got a population of almost 10 million. Most of those were on the streets at some point, on parks, watching on gigantic screens to participate in this. And of course, millions lining the route to Windsor. Extra trains and coaches were laid on. People drove to London. I don't think you get a hotel room for love nor money by the end. And what if there's some sort of panic in the crowd? Somebody could fall over when the crowd is moving very rapidly. People trip over that fallen person and there's a stampede and people get trampled to death. That didn't happen. It all passed off without a hitch. So it's all very well planned. This London Bridge plan for the Queen's death has been planned since the 1960s, and it's been tweaked now and again. There was magnificent music in the funeral service at Westminster Abbey, which went on for just under an hour, and it was really the best of British on display. The ceremonial was flawless. It showcased a millennium of architecture in Westminster Abbey, and the music obviously wasn't all by British composers, but by German composers, other ones, whoever writes the best music, the choirs and the musicians were really all just pitch perfect. So I think no other country can compete with this when it comes to things of that nature. So it wasn't a terribly lugubrious funeral. Her death was not unexpected, I'll be frank, but the funeral sort of showed how the United Kingdom can be a cultural superpower. There was pomp and circumstance on display. There'd been about 11 days of choreographed pageantry. The period of mourning is formally over. You can take off that black armband. The flag can now be flown at full mast. We can move forward. We can't be wallowing in grief forever. It's been a chance to purge one's sadness, and I actually wanted to grieve, but I couldn't. It may sound daft that I actually wanted to feel sadness, but I felt curiously unemotional about it. And people aren't right or wrong to feel this way or that. She was an icon idolized by many. It was a case example of what psychologists call a parasocial relationship, people feeling they know someone who they've never actually met. And my eye fell on her twice in my life that I actually saw, and then I saw the coffin today, and that's the closest I'll ever get to her until I actually visit her tomb in Windsor Castle. So some people have experienced a sense of loss. There's a transition to a junior generation, to a new monarch. It's not terribly lugubrious, as people saw her death a long time ago, and I was telling people for well over a year that she was about to die. So the funeral procession was very splendid and stirring, wasn't terribly somber. Despite them playing mournful music, all sorts of ones. So perhaps some people felt it was tristful. And the contrast between this funeral and that of Princess Diana, which is 25 years ago, almost to the week, could scarcely be greater. A 36-year-old woman who died very suddenly in a car crash and left behind two little children, and fingers were pointed at paparazzi. They were false accused of causing her death and so on. That was very different circumstances. So it wasn't terribly more than today, but obviously there's bereavement for the family. They've had time to acclimatise. They've been able to steel themselves. So I think they're probably inured towards her death. And obviously Prince Charles, he didn't want to be too long-faced, but he couldn't, on the other hand, be seen to be too happy to finally inherit the crown. So there's some sorrow, of course. Anyway, Prince Andrew hopefully will never be seen again, which would be a good thing for the future of the monarchy. And it was pleasing that Meghan has nothing to say. There have been rumours in the press that Prince Charles is now going to try and get Andrew and Harry stripped of their titles. I don't know if that's true. I doubt that's true in the case of Harry, actually. There's actually only Parliament can do that. The crown isn't the gift of Parliament. Parliament can alter the line of succession, as it did only 10 years ago, when it said in future girls have an equal footing with boys when it comes to the line of succession. Right, thank you so much for watching my channel. So please subscribe on Patreon and donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo.